During the day, the atmosphere around the Capitol Hill organized protest zone has been called festival-like with its large crowds and music. But the overnight hours are different, and they're proving to be a challenge for both the movement's organizers and Seattle police. King 5's Callie Greenberg joins us live from downtown Seattle. And Callie, I know many people are wondering, what happens when they need help and they need to call 911? Will Seattle police respond?
And so that area has been occupied and being called the Capitol Hill organized protest area for a week now. And, speakers who are looking to organize this movement, they have said that the activities that happen between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. are concerning after the big crowds are gone. Now, Seattle Police Chief Carmen Best, what she has said is that police will only respond inside the boundaries of the CHOP if there is a direct threat to life and safety. Now, this has left businesses and people who live in the area wondering what's going to happen if they call 911. Will anyone show up? Well, the owner of the auto shop Car Tender, which is right on the border of the Capitol Hill organized protest zone, said he called 911 overnight Monday to report a burglary, but said none of the cops showed up. The owner said he and his son captured the suspect. That's the video you're seeing right here, but eventually they let the man go.
We're just trying to run a small business. We're trying to, make a living. We're trying to be good members of the society, and we're trying to be good neighbors to the neighborhood. And I think that we've really been let down by, the mayor's office, Seattle Police Department, and the fire department.
The Seattle Police Officers Guild has also blamed what's happening in Capitol Hill on local leaders, calling it unreasonable activism. Now, city leaders have not given specifics on what's going to happen moving forward. Here's Mayor Jenny Durkin.
We're working with all people right now to move forward to find a way that we can accommodate First Amendment, but also make sure that we have a vital area for our businesses and residents.
Now, what we're hearing is that overnight outside of the Car Tender, there were about a dozen people guarding that building, some of them armed with firearms, just making sure no one broke in once again. We have heard reports that there are talks moving forward about moving the protest area just slightly to make it easier for first responders to have access to that portion of Capitol Hill, but no formal decisions have been made. Live in Seattle, Callie Greenberg, King 5 News.